Hello, everyone. Let's see. Who have we got here already? We have Martin. Hello. I think you were first today. Uh, hello, Bijan. Hello, Carl. Hello, Felix. Hello, Loki. 392. Hi, Stephanie. Glad you finished the second intro. Hope you enjoyed it. Hello, Ian Carr. Hello, Aviator 1701E. Or rather, I should call you Aviator Enterprise, but you know. Albert Zaski, hello. Derp Squad, hello. Dungarek Hammer, hello. DGV40, hello. Haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? Donald Fritz, I hear the opening of Iron Brew. You were right. Old Richard, Dr. Good afternoon. Question: could Churchill's urgings have actually discouraged Sir John from acting more aggressive, as in, oh, God's not him again? Actually, I think without Churchill's urgings, they wouldn't have even tried the next day. Honestly, St. John was looking at Charles de Gaulle. Look, remember, this operation starts off. Charles de Gaulle is planning to go rogue with just his two, how do I put this? His two troop transports, a single merchant ship, and the sloops he could gather. That's what he was planning to go down there with, and that's what he thought would be enough to take Dakar. And there wouldn't have even been 13 landing craft if the British had gone on. The British basically are sending what they have available, have been slowly putting together the idea of possibly doing something about the Portuguese islands, which they're worried about the Germans trying to seize in the Atlantic and operating submarines from. And in the end, they settle for quickly asking Portugal if Portugal wouldn't mind strengthening the garrison. And Portugal goes, we fully understand, and we've already doubled the garrison. Because we have no love for our next door neighbor or the Germans, potentially. And we'd rather make sure that if we do have trouble with our next door neighbor, you're definitely going to be on our side. Derp Squad, hello to your feline research assistants. Hello, Eamon. Hello, Yickers. Hi, Carl. Oh, well, yeah. And Jen of Hi Doc and all of Iron Brewers. We won't start just yet because I'm running a bit quick, so I'll set that and take that back to there. Give people a chance to join up. Hi, Jay. Oh, I should have let de Gaulle go. He was irritant and much more useful leaders in the Free French would have taken place. It's one of those interesting things is that one of the interesting what ifs of Dakar is if Charles de Gaulle had actually succeeded, he would have ended up with a far more senior officer in Lerdu there. He'd have ended up inheriting two rear admirals, a vice admiral, Bossier. There are all these senior people who, as I said in part 2, who would suddenly become part of the Free French. And how's he going to deal with them? You know, that becomes a very interesting scenario. Oh, Richard, good answer. Thank you. Yeah, that's the thing. Those people, it's one of those interesting what if moments at Dakar. It's also an interesting sort of war. Jerison, hello. In Car, there seems to have been no civil war between Vichy West Africa and other parts of Free French Africa, despite common borders. Well, Gabon might disagree with you on that one because the forces from Chad quickly took out the Vichy in Gabon. But honestly, you're talking about such small forces in relation to what was going on in the war and the ability to mass them and supply them and give them the required logistics that there is a little bit of fighting, but there's never going to be much because they just don't have the ability to do it. It's the tyranny of distance and logistics. It's basically, if you wanted to go 3 places in the world where, well, 4, but one, we don't fight in that often. Tyranny of logistics and distance. The Pacific is always, it comes up. Russia, it always comes up. The American Civil War and fighting across America, it comes up. And Africa, it comes up. It's also a factor in every other war and every other thing. But in those four places, it will always come up as a major factor. And this was the case here. Afternoon, Blue Ship Builder. Donna Fitz. How motivated were the Finnish insurance forces? I imagine that they really didn't want to fight. Well, de Gaulle imagined that, but that wasn't really the truth. They were quite prepared to fight, and they fought very hard and very well. You know, they drive off two battleships and quite a significant British force. Admittedly, thanks to the fog, they perhaps didn't realise quite what they were faced with, and also did limit the effectiveness of the British forces. But honestly, they're putting up a significant fight. It was a constant worry for the British, the idea that Vichy France might become not so neutral Vichy France. Sorry, close run thing. Kind of like Vichy France, you have to manage it very carefully. And there's also froth in the bottle as well. Shows you just how frothy Iron Brew can be. Right. G'day, Samuel. In car. Why was the incomplete Riculou moved from mainland France to Dakar when other ships were not and remained in Toulon? Because a battleship is a big thing to lose. If you notice, the French basically tried to get all their battleships out of France as the war was going badly. And there is a reason for that. They're trying to preserve their fleet. Hi, Frederico Vego. Hi, Tom Rottler. That's good. I apologize in advance if my dislike for de Gaulle becomes evidently clear this evening. Don't worry, my dislike for him will also become clear at some point. But I was trying to be. You said the thing is, when even I'm saying the thing I always point is I'm not a fan of de Gaulle at all. I prefer Leclerc as a rule. But de Gaulle was the man on the spot, and yeah. Jim Heaton. We're all running that risk. Yeah, it comes up. It's de Gaulle. Right. So, before we get into this in too much detail, I'm just going to quickly go over the small changes which happened with the patron. Because I have been... It's kind of strange. I was asked a lot about merchandise, and I was asked a lot about all these sort of things, and basically, to an extent, professionalizing, I suppose, the channel on the Patreon. And so I have done. Within the limits of Patreon allowing me, because I'm still working on the other ideas for everything else. So that's why there's now 3 levels of Patreon. Because people were already paying, very kindly contributing that much anyway, it seems sensible. So if you do now go to my Patreon at any point in the future, you will notice there are 3 levels, and there's the one where you have all the voting rights, everything, all that stuff. But if you feel like contributing a bit more, you get a sticker. That actually people ask for it, so that's not entirely on me. And I'm actually quite... There's parts of me which are both alternately slightly embarrassed and also very happy that people did ask if they wanted the sticker and the sticker level put in. And there's a sort of a bit more than that, and you get a mug and a t-shirt with the Drac logo on it, to be precise. As I call it, this logo. The Drakenfinale one, because that's the one which Drac kindly designed for me, and it's really, really very cool, and it looks the best on mugs. I have tried both. Right, that's that out of the way. So let's see any questions. Afternoon, Jeff. Thomas Frank, if fog was such a big issue, could the Allies not have waited until it cleared, or was a permanent feature of local climate? It was more a permanent feature of the people trying to rush. Donald Fritz, they just seem like such a landline from both sides. If such an unknown factor, using these forces to defend from the Allies, and saying for the Allies attacking, will they put down arms and join us, or put up hard defense since you're still shooting at them? That is the problem. Jerison, Leclerc as Free French leader would have been incredible. French Algeria might still be a thing. Yeah. Stephanie, de Gaulle was the man on the spot in all the senses, particularly after his failure. Yeah, that's the point. Good evening, Greg Salowski. Brock Payne, looking forward to this one. Thank you, Brock. And thank you for being, well, I think Brock's the first admin I've seen. Thank you for being there. Jeff Bieler, de Gaulle was good at seizing moment. This was not one of them. No, Dakar was not one of them. And Brock Payne, out of curiosity, has anyone found a place to purchase the memoirs of Paul Jean Mazin? CEO of Reclus? Was published in the 1990s. Ooh. I have been hunting that, but I haven't managed to find a place either, so if anyone finds it, that'd be interesting. Jeff, Menace was not at all an all-out operation. If the goals could not be met cheaply, better to cut losses and go home. That's certainly what the British decided. So, France falls. And I have covered, when I was talking about the E-boat war, the full effects of that in local terms. In terms of the channel, in terms of the small bits. But you have to remember, France is not just a European power. She's one of the global powers. She's one of the ones with an empire spanning the world. With bases and ships and equipment and infrastructure all around the world. At key places. And let's be honest, this is a key factor also in the fall of Singapore. If French Indochina had joined the Free French immediately, become part of the Allies, then there wouldn't been so much a risk of Japan just walking in there, because it would have been part of the Allies fighting the war. There would have been a joined up defense locally, and if anything had happened, the British would have been it would have meant war with the British. That's and that would have secured and made Singapore far stronger. So it has a big impact globally, okay? So this is one of those things. It's a classic scenario. You build your forces to rely on your allies because that's smart economic strategic position to do, because it allows you to invest properly in your forces and make sure they are strong in places. Because your forces can't be super strong everywhere. And you just can't afford that economically. So you have these alliances so that you can pick where you are strong and maybe have a strong mobile force that can go and patch up the whole. But everyone in the Allies is strong in certain places, and so the mobile force is what makes them super strong. You lose those allies, you're in a lot of trouble. But, and I cannot stress this enough, the British alone against the world mantra is not quite correct. Britain was definitely the first amongst equals of the still belligerent powers at this point, by a long way. Britain was also the glue that was holding it together by its diplomacy, by its international network, by its ability of freedom of maneuver. So all these things gave it the power and the influence and the ability to hold this alliance together. It was also one of the world's preeminent military powers, if not, I know it doesn't have the cool equipment that we sometimes talk about in World War II, because everyone tends to focus on one side's equipment. But actually, the British equipment stacks up pretty well. As, again, we've been over before. So it still had the Commonwealth one and Commonwealth Empire, those troops. It still had Greece as beneficent neutral. It still had America as a beneficent neutral, and it still had a whole lot of free forces. So it was good. It would have liked a whole lot more free French, because if the French Empire had decided to go with the Free French, that would have given Britain a lot more global security and really helped secure the Atlantic, because they could have basically kept most of their Atlantic operational procedures, because the French forces, the naval forces, would have still been there as part of the Free French. So, that would have been the advantage. Cargannon, hello! Good evening from Belgium. I am late and won't be able to stay long as I'm going to work. I'm able to catch up at work. Enjoy. Well, good luck with work. I hope as you're working in Belgium, you're at least getting good chocolate supply. Although, any Swiss listeners as well, I hope you're also getting good chocolate supply. The only one who seems to be suffering today for chocolate supply is me, but we'll leave that to one side. I've run out of fruit and nut. It's terrible. But, to be fair, the response from one of my students today when I was talking about this with them at the end of our seminar was that I was nutty enough. So, Dev Squad, Zephyr Wilson. De Gaulle made sure he was the first senior officer in London. He had always viewed the army as a route to politics. That really doesn't surprise me. And yeah. Ian Carr, there seems to be no Allied trust in second in command of Vichy Admiral Darlan, head of the French Navy. No, there was no trust. But that's possibly because Darlan's promises about what would happen if France declared ceasefire or peace with Germany kept changing as to what would happen to the Navy. But there were people in the Free French, etc., who they did trust. Jeppy, the strategy seemed it worked in Chad, Central Africa, and Reunion, but not really anywhere else, especially in colonies with good defense. There's an interesting thing. In Chad, there's a reason it works in Central Africa, and it's I'm going to quickly pop right to the end, because that allows me to get a name. That's all thanks to Adolphe Sylvester Felix Ebule, who is a very, very cool dude. And actually, I have a picture of him somewhere. Yeah. I'm actually possibly going to leave him here for this entire time, because I consider him one of the coolest characters that is involved in World War II. He is, just so you know, the guy on the left, of course, is de Gaulle. Felix is the guy on the right. He is one of the most powerful men in Africa in this time, and it is he who brings the whole of all the African colonies that come to support the Free French are thanks to him. It's thanks to him that Leclerc is able to take Gabon, because of the intelligence and the work he does laying in advance to help Leclerc out. So basically, Leclerc turns up and goes, I've got this operation to do. And Felix goes, don't worry. I have it all in plan, all underway. These are the troops for you to command. This is this. We have trucks. We have fuel. We have ammunition. We have it all. And it's in a case of, wow. If anyone actually, here's the real thing. If I had to pick my first choice to not deprive the French of their best potential military leaders on the ground and give them a very good politician to run the Free French, I would actually go with Felix. Because in a fair world, he would have been the first choice. Brock Payne, if Menace had gone off in late June, Dakar probably would have had declared for the Free French. Governor Kayla was removed by Vichy for wanting to fight on. Ditto Admiral Planon. Yep. Again, It all depends on who leaders are there. The French will fight and they will follow their leadership. If the leadership chooses to join the Free French, they tend to follow it. If the leadership doesn't, they tend to follow that. And you have to remember the Vichy government is technically the legitimate government of France. This is the nasty little thing. But technically, the French government, the actual sitting government, surrenders. Agrees peace, whatever. De Gaulle is technically going against it by fighting. Jeff Beeler, Ian Carr, and the aircraft delivery route across Africa to fly planes to Egypt was also important and would have been simplified by Dakar being Free French. There are lots of things which would be made easier by Dakar being Free French. You might well have been able at that point in Africa to build an east-west railway from Dakar across. You couldn't from Freetown because of the train. Frederick Vega, my chocolate supplies are slow. Low, sadly. That is sad. Kargan, the frites are the best. I'm adapting what he's saying, but you know. Because I have no chocolate. Oh, that's sad. Dirt Squad. Jeff Beeler, even then, the Allies resisted giving him their backing as long as possible in the hope that a more senior officer, preferably admiral, would show up. Yes, there's a reason they want an admiral. They don't want the French Navy. The French Army, they would love, but they can't get. It's in France. The French Navy is round the world. They would like that. What was the standard armed procedure when running into a Vichy freighter or passenger liner? If it was doing France-to-France connections, the standard procedure was to check it, salute it, and send it on. If it was doing anything fishy, then it might be pulled into an Admiralty court. They prefer not to do that. There's an edition of his memoirs published in 2013, edited by his daughter, which can be found on Amazon in the original French. I would need lots of help with Google Translate. But is there a Kindle version? Because then you can get that translated sometimes. Jim Heaton, nothing great is done without great men, and they are great because they wanted it. De Gaulle in 1924. He really did think he was the new Julius Caesar, didn't he? He really did. As we look, De Gaulle is on the right. Oh, sorry, yeah. It's on... Yeah, it is on your right, because you're... Yeah. De Gaulle is on your right, which is my left. Sorry. Ian Carr, senior French officers must have been included amongst those evacuated from Dunkirk. However, apparently at the time, they chose to return to France. Yes. Because they thought they'd fight on. Or because they thought the war was over and they might as well go home. Jerison, inverted. I don't think De Gaulle was short or that heavy set. That is the trouble. On my screen, it's... Yeah. Well. It's this side of the photo is De Gaulle. This side of the photo is Felix. How's that work? Ian Carr, senior French officers must have been... Vision, I used Felix Ibou's surname for a French character of African descent in my sci-fi novel, Josephine Ibou, the captain's yeoman from Paris, France. Cool. Vision, Felix Ibou's ashes were placed in the Pantheon. They deserve to be. Doc, I'll drop a link or two for you in Dice Squad. Oh, cool. De Gaulle is the tall one. Yeah, he is. But let's be honest. Out of those two men, he's not the most impressive, honestly. There's De Gaulle, who looks a little bit, well, to be honest, shabby in that picture. And there's Felix, who looks like a smartly turned out gentleman with all the trimmings. Going, hello. This is how you dress properly for this role, young man. It appears from damage to HMS Resolution that, and usually amongst nations, the French submarine torpedoes function early World War II. Maybe the Germans should have taken note. The Germans were too busy trying to copy British torpedoes, which they got from HMS Seal, I think. Stoney Wilson, De Gaulle was well over 6 feet. That it was one good thing in his favour. He was tall. Carl Gasman, were the Kriegsmarine using Vichy ships or ship identity for the merchant raiders? They tried to occasionally, but again, if it was fishy, the British did pull it over. There's got Felix was unfortunately far too not white for the Allies to let run anything. Actually, this is the interesting thing. Now, that is a perception that certainly comes through, but actually you find that the British are very happy to let Felix run a lot of things. The problem, and so are the Commonwealth nations. Honestly, it doesn't matter to them that much. Remember, you're talking about colonial administrations which are used to having lots of people of races who have managed to work, other races, non-white races who've worked up. That's part of the colonial administration system because it's very sensible. It means you are basically taking out the people who are smartest and most able from the existing population, giving them promotions and a good quality of life. So instead of looking for rocking the boat and maybe leading a rebellion to get rid of you, they are built into your system. It's very cynical. It's very not very nice, but it's very effective. Martin Dock, Dr. Clark, De Gaulle looks like Peter Sellers on the Pink Panther. Yeah, he does a bit. Right. Bijan, I read somewhere that during World War II, most free French soldiers that fought in Europe were Africans. Yes, quite a lot came from Senegal. Quite a lot came from Chad and Gabon and all over Africa. Bjord over in the corner trying to figure out how to make a torpedo that works and failing even when they get a copy of someone else's work. It was the British way to have locals run things. It was. It worked well. Don Fritz, it's possible for individual Frenchiers of various likely small ships to get lost at sea and then up in a controlled area or Vichy French restrict free movements. Very possible for them, and quite a few do. Especially submarines. Death Squad. I should clarify. 2 not white to be in charge of anything outside the colonies. That's why I said in a if I could pick my choice without worrying about it. That's the trouble that would stop him there. But again, Churchill did strongly lobby for his inclusion in any French cabinet which should be formed. Churchill liked him, probably because they had their own communication going on, which completely went round the Gaul, but they found it more practical to talk to each other directly. Anyway, the French Empire. So, here is the problem for the British. Please look around the world where all the French Empire is. We've been over him before. Operation Ironclad, Madagascar. What does Madagascar and Dakar share? They are both on the routes to the Indian Ocean. Critical points on the routes to the Indian Ocean. And both are also... How do I put this politely? Those are the routes which take supplies to Egypt, which take supplies to Persia, to go up into Russia, which take supplies to India and the Far East. Those are critical routes for the British. Take care, Carl. And you need to defend them. And the trouble is, the Dakar's a threat. What's interesting is that they didn't do anything when they were dealing with Mirza al-Kabir. They are quite a long way away from each other. But honestly, I would have thought you would have dealt with the two at the same time. After all, there were ships there. It is an important place. But frankly, there were a lot less ships there. So probably if you turned up at that point and demanded they join the Free French or surrender their ships, they'd have probably done it. Grosowski, I should imagine Winston got on well with everyone who disliked de Gaulle or went around him. Possibly. Steamwhite, rumored 2 Germans joined US Navy pre-war and made off with the USN TLB design. Would explain Dud's earlier war. That's unfortunately the Germans got that themselves. That was not that. There's no reality in them nicking the American designs. They didn't need to. Their design was bad enough on its own. Dirk Scott, it was a general colonial thing to allow the locals to run. The colonial power would split the locals into a big group and a small group. Empower a small group who are reliant on the colonial power. Yeah. As I explained earlier. It's cynical, but it's effective. Unfortunately, we're living with its legacy to this day. Dirk Scott, most people who knew de Gaulle got on well with anyone who disliked de Gaulle. I think de Gaulle's tailor disliked him from the look of that jacket. But no, it was... The whole list you're dealing with is you're dealing with a scenario which had never been really dealt with before. And it's always terrible when you start saying that. But here's the scenario. You've got global powers, and you have... Britain doesn't just have one of them. It has the Dutch, global power with an empire off in Southeast Asia, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish. 2 of them are neutrals. One of them are very pro-Allied neutral. One of them has lost their territory, as has Belgium, let's be honest, and they also have their own empire. And they have been completely taken over, so you now have the Free Dutch and Free Belgians. And then you have France. France hasn't been taken over. It isn't still fighting. It's technically declared peace. You're technically back in the Napoleonic era. We've got allies stopping and changing sides in the middle of a war. How do you deal with that? What do you do? The Navy's a threat to you where it's positioned around the world, especially if the other side gets hold of it. You have no faith the other side's not going to try and get hold of it. And look at where they've got. They've got all these territories which are in critical areas. In areas which, frankly, you'd rather the enemy didn't get a toehold. So here is the Free French story, and I will admit I have shamelessly nicked this map from Wikipedia because, as we all know, my artistic skills are not that great. I'm going to disappear them for a second. That was not one. Them for a second. Do that. So, this is the French Empire, and I'm only dealing with stuff which is really up until sort of Operation Torch 1942 sort of thing. Operation Torch, as you can see, all that territory doesn't join the Free French till after Operation Torch. In fact, they don't really gain more territory till November 1942. There are a few bits that sort of they get control of, but getting control of them is very slow and very laborious. If you consider what they've gained by 1942 versus what they had in September 1940 and what they will get by the end of Operation Torch. They don't really have a great time. And that's the big issue you have, is the whole honorable peace idea. That it was an honorable peace treaty. And the Germans would stick to it. And, of course, as we all know, Hitler initially does stick to it. But you do have some interesting things going on with the various leaders involved. But the Free French... how do I put this politely? They have a lot more factions than they do territory in many respects for the entire of World War II. Philly speak, connecting Nigeria to Sudan with a railway would have been a good thing. It would have been a very good thing. And it would have helped out with all sorts of... well, especially when you consider there's also plans and Cape to Cairo Railway. So if you can sort of hook in with that as well, you reduce... yes, you only have one rail line, but you can speed up the movement of goods dramatically. But not to be. So, here is the Navy stuff. And I'm going to leave them up because apparently they won't go anywhere. They don't want to. So, I've sort of played around these maps to try and make them roughly the same scale. Now, the Battle of Atlantic and the French Navy, as we all know, there were various sections and hunting groups which were combined. They were French and Anglo-French hunting groups, there were French hunting groups, and there were Anglo-British hunting groups. The main French hunting groups, as far as the British were concerned, operated out of Dakar. Why? It's a far bigger port, a far greater facility, far more infrastructure than Freetown. It's also in a better position than Freetown. And ideally, the British would have liked the whole French Navy to have gone and disappeared over to Martinique. Hopefully under an admiral who would suddenly declare for the Free French. But, you know, we don't always get what we dream for. The French had, up until the fall of France, largely slotted in with the British command structures. They had put in forces within them, and they've been working alongside them. Their loss is a major loss, but it's also potentially... how do I put this? The loss of the French is a negative on 1 point. It takes you down to 0, to neutral. However, if those forces go over to the other side, either because Vichy France joins Germany as a belligerent power, or those units get subsumed into the German Navy somehow, then suddenly it goes from having dropped to 0 to going as a negative and being a problem that the Royal Navy has to deal with. And that's the big threat. That's why Mers el Kabir happens. This is why Dakar actually gets some support. So literally, fear of that. Fear of the potential. Dev Scott. While I think that the early issues with German torpedoes had a lot to do with the magnetic detonators, they struggled with differing strengths of the world's magnetic field. The advantage Britain had was they had a large number of places around the world to do these surveys from. Old Richard, how many of Ricklin's main guns were actually functional? Many pre-fit or refit photos show a barrel missing from B turret. At the moment, it seems like her 4 main battery were working. At least 4 of the guns seem to have been used. I've the turret, the particular gun you're talking about missing from B turret. I'm not sure if it goes before or after this, and if they therefore have full battery capability. There is a rumor there's an issue with one of the guns in A turret, which stops it working, but there's nothing mentioned about a gun not working in B turret. But again, I've also seen those same pictures. So honestly, I'm not 100% sure. At least 4, possibly as many 6, but it depends on some details which I haven't been able to find. Honestly, it's quite sketchy, some of the details. It's like I said in the introduction, I still have no idea who was the commander of the 101 Royal Marines Brigade. No idea. The Dalmatians, as I christened them in my head while I was working on them, I have no idea who was commanding them. I know who their senior staff officer was. Thomas Rottweiler, hello. Did the French enclaves in India side with Free French because they were surrounded by British controlled territory? What do you think? They may not have had much choice in the matter. In car, while a rail route looks feasible on a map of Africa, the Sahara Desert will complicate matters. Okay. The thing is, the reason I bring that up as an option is that was considered by the British as an option as it had been considered and surveyed. It wasn't going to be easy, but the route had been surveyed, so they knew how they could go about doing it. They had the resources, and the resources would have been provided because that would have been very useful. It wouldn't have been easy, but it could have been done. Brock. Old Richard. Originally, 2 turret was manned, 4 guns, and then gun blew up. Then crew moved to I turret the following day. Ian Carr. Germans appeared to have made no moves to persuade Vichy France to join them as a belligerent power. Well, that's what we know now with hindsight. In World War II, the British had no idea what that was or wasn't happening. And we also do know that the Germans did start trying to persuade them to do sort of things, extend the final solution for the Jewish people and all these things on that. And actually, one of the interesting things is the difference between certain administrators in the empire and how they sort of go, no, not going to do that. Propane, the full battery was used during battle, but not at the same time. There's got in-car, yep. Having the ground you build your railway on nearly always moving doesn't help. The Russians learned this the hard way with the Trans-Siberian Railway through the tundra. Jeff Beeler, how formal a plan of action did the Allies have? The political plan for Torch did not go to plan either. Overwhelming force in Torch seemed to fill the gaps. Not enough in Menace? Not enough, and not enough visible force. Honestly, they needed to force M, as it seems to have been called under John Cunningham, needed to have turned up before Force Y, that's the cruisers, that was sent out to reinforce it by Vichy France. Well, actually, it was supposed to reinforce the Congo, but didn't make it down there. If a force with probably, and this is me thinking out the top of my head, but me thinking of if I'm trying to overraw this force, which has a single battleship and a force in it, if you'd arrived with an extra battleship, a third battleship, and before the cruisers had arrived, before they'd been reinforced, you could well have pushed the day. If you'd arrived with that force and enough landing craft to be able to get in the Royal Marines in force into the places, and you'd landed them quickly, that was the thing. Honestly, they pussyfoot around. You need to. It's You see, the thing is, if I was going to do an overroaring force operation, I would have turned up and landed troops during the night. And I would have taken a couple of ports on either side of the isthmus, sort of back there, and have the ships sort of appear around them in the day and just go, we're all here, we've got troops ashore already, you're going to surrender? And I wouldn't have had, oh, God, the airmen on the airfield. We will get into all this in a bit. It just, yeah. What was in Dakar? So, the Rickaloo, incomplete and damaged, thanks to Swordfish. Okay, can I please, and I would like to re-emphasize this because I see it on a lot of um, websites and a lot of places elsewhere. The Swordfish was not a veteran aircraft in 1939 and 1940. It was not an ancient aircraft in 1939 and 1940. It was a practically new aircraft in 1939 and 1940. In fact, if you compare it to the F-35, it barely scratched the surface of its service. It's not an ancient aircraft. It might look like it to an unschooled eye, thinking biplanes belong in World War One, but it's very viable as an aircraft and it works for the time. And Jeff Taylor, since the Royal Marine Division commander was Sturgis and acting brigadier, maybe your guy was the brigade CO. What was his name again? I have it all in here, bit, and he wasn't. I know he wasn't because I know exactly where he was. The senior staff was Lieutenant Colonel Philip Smith Hill, and I know he wasn't the brigade commander at the time. He is the senior staff officer at the time, though. So I'm looking for a colonel as the acting brigadier. But I don't know. I don't. Rock Payne. Okay, I'm unfortunately going to have to go do repairs on the roof. I'll have to finish it catching up later. Take care, Brock. Good luck. Sean Mack. Hello, Sean. Think about all the services the US provided the UK while still being neutral. Vichy could have done some of that stuff for the French, Germans. Vision. You can build railways anywhere with enough effort. There are always in the Middle East and North Africa. Just have a few sand plows and snow tanker trains of water. Ian Carr, the size of the naval forces is in stark contrast to the later Mozambique operation. Yeah, it is. Felix B. Yes, the great sand dunes are in the Western Sahara, e.g. Algeria. Dirt Squad. Shamak, much like Ireland, the US was the least neutral nation, at least until 1941. Yeah. Mason Should. Hello, Mason, and thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you. I don't know about 1940, but in 41, France gave Germany basing rights in their colonies, which was a reason for the Allied invasion of Syria. Even though they didn't exercise this right until Tunisia in 1942, it was a very viable threat. Basically, the British, as I said, the British were scared of the Germans getting basing rights. Here's the thing. With Dakar, what happens if German submarines started basing from there? Then that widens the whole pool of conflict they're having to deal with. The Germans are already starting to build and make use of places on the French Atlantic coast. Getting down to Dakar as well, that's a big problem the British would have to deal with. Vision. In the time it took to develop and deploy the F-35, we went from Model 1 biplanes to post-war jet fighters. Yeah. Michael Sanderson, hello. Swordfish were great. They were so slow, but Bismarck's fire control couldn't hit them. It works. Seem like those pesky magnetic torps on both sides. Famous Swordfish so armed against the Bismarck. US submarines, early efforts on them. Germans finally sorted them out. Yes, after HMS Seal was so useful. Hello, Golden Eagle. Why did the British need to take the car? I'm not sure they... Golden Eagle, Dakar, as Greg Southey, is Senegal in West Africa. That makes sense. Thank you. Don't worry. I think you're thinking of Dakar rather than Dakar. I am trying to pronounce them slightly differently to make it different. Oh. Yeah. Well, Golden Eagle, welcome to the world. There's lots of places spelt and sounding the same. It's quite cute. And just wait until you get into a fight between someone from York, England, and New York in America over which is the better city. And I'm not getting into it because the Railway Museum is in New York, and frankly, I don't want to be banned from there. Jeff Beeler, Lieutenant Colonel Roy Smith, he was GSO under the Army Commander Major General NMS Irwin during the abortive attack of Dakar. Yes, he was General Officer Staff. He's the senior staff one. He's also the senior staff officer of the brigade. And I know there is a brigadier there because in response to it, it says there's a British brigadier here. Da-da-da-da-da. So, there is obviously a brigadier there somewhere, or at least an acting brigadier, in charge of 101 Brigade. But we don't know who. Right. So, the Allied aims by September 1940, when this is all going down, secure the Atlantic. As I've been saying, it's the no-brainer. It is the very critical thing. Secure the Atlantic. Rebuild, rearm, grow, deter invasion of the UK, and eventually return to free the people and nations of occupied Europe. That's a nice dream, but securing the Atlantic is the first priority. If you don't secure the Atlantic, you can't do any of that. You can't supply your forces in North Africa. You cannot supply your forces in the Far East. You cannot draw forces from the Far East or materials from the Far East. You can't draw materials from Canada or from America. You can't do any of that unless you secure the Atlantic. You need it. And show strength and resolve in order to encourage potential friends and deter potential foes. That's basically Allied aims. If they sound similar to the British aims, that's because they are. Because I said, the British are the primus inter pares, and they are pretty much dominating that lead at the moment. Right. For the Free French, they've got a slightly different next on this leads. They need a decent capital. Living off British largesse hurts their negotiating position. This is another reason why Dakar is so useful for them. It has a massive load of gold there, thanks to France and various other powers who had sent their gold there for safekeeping, including the Polish. Might explain why there's a Polish transport as part of the forces that turn up to bring the troops to Dakar and Senegal. Why? Because the Polish would like their gold back. They want to buy things with it. However, for as a capital, they need somewhere economically developed, close enough to the action that they can actually have an input, and preferably coming with a lot more personnel and equipment. And where do they have? Outside of Algeria, outside of France, where are the largest concentration on these things? In French Atlantic West Africa. No, yeah. That's the areas, i.e. Senegal, Dakar. Show that they are effective force, not just British puppets, and this is why they really need their own capital. And this is again why Felix is quite so powerful and important, because he gives them all this although it's not in their preferred place and it's not their best thing options. C1, someone build California high-speed rail for us, please. I'm not touching that one. Vision, okay, I'll surrender, given that York has a cool railway museum. Isn't there a Viking theme park too? Basically, York is one giant Viking theme park itself, in my experience going there. It's still got huge amounts of the city walls around there. There is a lovely hotel right next to the railway station, which I can recommend staying in. It was very, very nice. My father managed to break a chair, and we ended up getting a free trip back there. But, my father was not always a light gentleman, and he managed to sit down in a seat and go on the floor. The seat was not exactly the most robustly constructed either. And yes, my family was laughing about it still to this day, and the poor man's been dead now for a couple of years. Yeah, it must be a couple of years. That's always the good jokes, the ones which last after you're gone. And Ronan Cash, the Free French had actually retreated from France, where they prepared themselves, then led to liberation and defeat of the Germans. Inca. Well, the swordfish from Ark Royal attacking Sheffield would have recognised her. They had both been part of Force H for quite some time. Yes, but Force H. But as we've been over before, Sheffield had been very annoying to the Felice Aram on several occasions by pretending to be things she wasn't in exercises. So I still think they were getting their own back. And as Michael Sanderson has pointed out, she was out of position as far as they understood her to be. But these things can be different because you see, you've got the difference between the ship's positioning and whether there's any errors in terms of their own assessment, because it's pre-GPS. Their own estimations on distance, bearing. Radar's not quite filling in that role yet at that point. Beacons aren't. It's an interesting time. So there are lots of areas which problems come in. Now, while I'm quickly taking a sort of in the middle, I'm going to say quickly where else you can find me. Twitter, at AC_Naval_History, Patreon, Anglo Maritime History. I'm also going to add that apparently down below on that side, there is a subscribe button, which if you click that and then click on the little bell next to it, you should always be told when new videos of mine come out. I'm going to say that with a smile and then move on, because hopefully the person who keeps telling me I need to actually say this more is not going to hurt me. Oh. Let's see. The Free French had tactically retreated from France, where they prepared themselves, then led the liberation and defeat of the Germans, as taught in French schools and museums under de Gaulle's presidency. Well, yeah. Right. So, Operation Menace, the failed seizure of Dakar. So here are some of the very senior Allied officers involved, and I'm going to disappear our good commander. for a second while I expand this, as I am wont to do on occasion. So, you have your Freemost Senior working from left to right on your screens. Should be Admiral of the Fleet, Roger Keyes. Charles de Gaulle is at the top, and Johnny Cunningham as a bottom. And along the right, I have explained the various personnel. Land Forces Commander in theory is General Carlos de Gaulle. Land Forces Commander in practice, i.e., one with a staff, personnel, assistants, all the things you need to actually run a brigade and, actually a couple of brigades and do a fight, is Major General Noel Owen. And also has the 13th Demi Foreign Legion Brigade under Alfred Maurice Cazud, and the 101 Royal Marine Brigade. Naval forces are under Vice Admiral John Cunningham, and it's a fun time had by all. Now, I know there are certain issues right then. So, de Gaulle both starts off by trying to organize this all on the fly himself. He basically gets together the 13th Demi Foreign Legion Brigade, and this is why I find it interesting, whereby some accounts say French Marines landed at this harbour, and I'm going, well, the French Marines were all in Egypt, and all these troops were ones from the UK. He could have had some French Marines. He could have somehow got hold of some, so there's always an option, so... But I'm not sure. It's an interesting formation. Keyes looks at the original plans and asks if he's supposed to be in charge of it, and they go, no, the French are leading it. And immediately puts Irwin under de Gaulle and tries to organize it that way. Because the original plans are literally de Gaulle will turn up, shout from offshore, from a ship, and the troops will come to him. Mm-hmm. Michael Sandon, this seems to be turning into Hunt the Bismarck, not Dakar. It happens in my chat occasionally. That's good. Damn. De Gaulle managed to look incredibly pompous and pretentious without even trying. Yeah. Jack, demi brigades are such a strange creature in the world of military organization among regiments and full brigades. Demi brigade is basically we don't actually have the troops for a brigade, but we're going to call it a brigade because we have so many senior officers. They have more officers than they have men in the relation, so that they have far too many officers, so it's called a demi brigade. And it's about a third to a quarter, depending on your perspective, of the size of the 101 Royal Marine Brigade. And then there are other units attached on top of that. Oh. Oh, that's a cruel joke, Derp Squad. That is a cruel joke. I'm not going to read that. Mason Stewart, did Barham hit Rickaloo during the battle? So this seemed to differ at this point. Well, let's put it this way. My trust in those sources comes from the Americans who refitted her, who said that they were repairing damage which looked like it had been caused by 15-inch gunfire. So I think Barham probably did. My understanding is that the French don't have Marines as we understand them in a separate branch. Is that correct? They are naval infantry, and they're it's an interesting organization. Getting into that is just weird. Felix B. Hunt the Rickaloo. Okay, now we found her. What do we do? That was a bit of a problem. Basically, what happens with these three commanders is you have Keyes hasn't been in post long enough. Charles de Gaulle has this plan, and then Paul Cunningham and Irwin are basically given the bare minimum available forces, which are supposed to be doing another operation, but Keyes has persuaded Churchill not to do it, to go and back him up. And let's put it this way. They had the forces designed for one operation, which was supposed to be a very light emphasis almost on a reinforcing operation. And now they weren't going to get to do that. Now they had to take part in an offensive operation, which they really weren't prepared for and really wasn't a good idea. Jeff Elam, I would say Irwin as an acting brigadier, acting major general, Commander 101 Brigade directly. No, he wasn't. No, he didn't. Jeff, I know that's one of the ideas that goes around, but actually I know he didn't because I do know there was another officer there. Because he was divisional commander. Kahaman, what was the biggest tuck up on the Dakar attack, and what's the biggest lesson that can be drawn from it? We'll get into that. We will get into that. Trust me, there are a couple of lessons. Felix B, would not that be much Charles de Gaulle's cult if not for Citroen cars' amazing survivability? Probably. Steam White, what? Where's the Yanks? You result not a fan of Gaulle? Mark Clark was usually sneaking around the Vichy naval leadership. No Yanks at this point. No Yanks at this point. Right. So they're all formed up. They're all having a interesting time, and they're all in very different ships. But let's go to this one. So, and I'm going to expand this. Now, so Francois Busson had been the overall governor in French Central Africa, but he was very much a career bureaucrat who would do what he was told. He wasn't necessarily pro-Vichy or anti-Vichy. He was pro-France, and as far as he was concerned, Vichy government were the elected constitutional government of France. I know we don't agree with that because, in the nicest way, the Nazi Germany, definitely the bad guys. So therefore, by acquiescing, etc., he's not doing anything. But it's also very understandable and a position which a lot of French men and women took in 1940. Remember that, this is 1940. A lot of the outrages of World War II had not happened yet. Busson is moved to take over West Africa, which is a bit of promotion. The reason is the person in charge in West Africa is definitely not pro-Vichy. But again, if he joined the Free French, would have been a humongous problem for de Gaulle because he was such a senior politician and administrator from France. There is also a vice admiral, again, another senior officer, who would have been very useful for the British in bringing a lot of the French Navy over. And he actually had been the guy who commanded at Dunkirk, that Contre-Admiral Marcel Landru. Then there's Rear Admiral Celeste Bourgu, brought a squadron of Cruiser's house, that's Force Y, and Rear Admiral Emile Lacroix, who had lost his ships at Menace Kabir. He sent down to replace Birigu because Birigu didn't get down to the Congo, and Darlan doesn't like him because Darlan doesn't like anyone who actually pays attention to what they're doing. They are a fairly cohesive bunch, though. This is the interesting thing. Compared to the Allied commanders, this lot is a fairly cohesive, fairly coordinated group, and who work well together. Jeff Ealer, except there is no division there. 101 is the highest level by HQ. Jeff, there is a division there. There is a divisional command. Oh, sort of. Let's put it this way. There is a light army divisional command sent along, and then there's a Royal Marines brigade. And the trouble is, Irwin is an army officer. He wasn't placed in charge of the Royal Marines brigade because the Navy wouldn't let. There's actually a whole document about this. The Navy didn't want army officers commanding Royal Marines brigades because they felt that that diluted the Royal Marines, and the Royal Marines are part of the Navy's troops. So this is the thing. 101 Brigade is part of the Royal Marines. They are the Royal Marines Brigade. Jeff, it's not logical. It's politics. It's service politics going on, even in the height of war. And there is actually a reason for that, because the Royal Marines, the Royal Navy needs the Royal Marines to go off and form their Marine Naval Basing Organizations, the MONABs, whereas the Army wants to is making the case even in 1940 to subsume the Royal Marines into them to make up for the troops they've lost in France. So the Royal Navy's worried that if the Army gets their way and puts Army brigadiers in charge of Royal Marines units, the Army will strip the Navy of the Royal Marines. Paul, at Menace, French units have been forced to demilitarize. Only effective French defense was quickly reactivated coastal batteries. Did the RN learn the wrong lessons at Menace? Yes and no, but at Menace, you have to remember the British. It's a surprise the British are going to start firing. By this point, well, you've had Landru has literally been sent down to West Africa to secure and firm up the defences. Literally, that's his job. Ian Carr, Admiral John Cunningham appears not to have been closely related to ABC and brother General Cunningham. Nope. Alex Sanson, Alex, ask your girlfriend to teach you French pronunciation. She's tried. I love her dearly. She has tried her best. Callum Gasman, I have my orders. Vice Admiral John Cunningham ran into the mines aboard HMS Russell in 1916 around Malta, laid by Germans. Not AH subs, but operated from the Adriatic. Carl Harmon. This Clark. You are put as commander invasion of Dakar. You can choose your generals, regiments, quantities, and ships. What's your dream composite of the invasion? It must be realistic. I would have taken probably 101 and 102 Brigade goes off to form the Monab in that ends up fighting in Crete and all that sort of stuff. So I would have taken 103 Brigade, which was still forming up. It wasn't at full strength, and it never did get to reach full strength. But if with that combined with the Demi Brigade would have made a full strength brigade style formation, I would have wanted a few more landing craft if I could have grabbed them from the training areas, and another battleship. And then I would have probably done, as I said, turn up in night, land my troops on either side of the isthmus, take over the isthmus on land, hopefully at night to cut them off from the rest of West Africa, have the warships, and so when they wake up in the dawn, they have troops ashore and ships all around them. and go, surrender. And I would have carefully made sure that the French troops were all, the Free French were all at the front. They would just be backed by British forces. So anyway, sorry, reading too much early war. US not supposed to be involved, but no US intelligence were already digging deep into naval intelligence and fishy sources. Oh yes, but that's what you always do. Just because you're not at war yet doesn't mean you don't prepare. And even if you never go to war, it's still good preparation to have. It's always good to have more information. It's always good to know what your enemy knows. Right. So here are the Allied forces deployed. Ark Royal, Barham, Resolution. Renown, I suppose. She was kind of available at that point. Would have been my third battleship. Or, well, I know she's a battlecruiser, but she's still fairly cool to have along. I don't really. You don't need much more. You honestly, you would probably need another couple of transports to bring in the for a 103 brigade. But you know, it's enough. Carmen Gasbert, Carmen. Dakar is in West Africa. Dakar is in Asia. Dakar in Oregon. Oh. I said you don't need much more forces really to do this. You really don't. What you need is a different plan of options, because they tried to surprise with the weather. They couldn't do the full appearing, and I would also try to get down there quicker. If I could have arrived 2 weeks earlier, which was possible, it would help. Carmen, dear me, Doctor didn't choose to bring a tribal or a town. There's no point bringing them. They don't really need to do any fighting. Leave the tribals and towns where you need to do fighting. Bring some Leander class. They're perfect for this mission. There's a reason they've taken HMS Dragon, HMS Delhi, and HMS Fiji, along with Cumberland and Devonshire as their first choices. You've got two counties, which are, one of them's been upgraded, one of them hasn't. Well, actually, no, both of them have been upgraded. You've got 3 light cruisers, of which one's modern, and you end up replacing that with another county. You are not. The whole point is you want to turn up there with enough force that you'd stop fighting. You don't want to have a fight. You don't want to turn this into a battle, so you don't want the tribals or the towns. You need them for the North Sea. You need them for the Mediterranean. They're off fighting. They're doing important stuff. Down here, what I need those extra Marines. I need to be able to land those brigades on either side of the isthmus, if I can get the picture up. Mm-hmm. This is Dakar. As you can see, it is. If I get rid of this, it's this bit. So, if I can land my brigades in such a way that I can block that off, i.e., one each side, I win. I don't need to fight. I need to overraw. I need to win by basically going, look at all this force I've got. Look at the troops ashore. You do want to fight this massive battle? No. Surrender. Mm-hmm. Rowan Light. Would Rickaloo have suffered the same way Graf Spey did in a multiple ship engagements due to its two turret layout? Yes. Its advantage is it can go head on to a threat, and it's got all its firepower pointing forwards. Its disadvantage is if that threat manages to move around and is attacking from multiple angles, you have nothing. You only have secondary armament covering your rear. Incar, strong British, fairly modern British destroyer force. Pretty much, yes. There's a fairly good destroyer force there. Car Hamnet, could we have steamed straight from Menace to Dakar using the same fleet or with emergency resupply, then immediate steam, or is that not possible? That would have been possible. But there wasn't seriously the massive force there. When Meza Kabir takes place, well, you've got a bit of time. Because Meza Kabir takes place in July. This happens in September. In July, I think Rickaloo's there. Yeah, Rickaloo is there. But there are no cruisers there. There isn't enough force there. There's a whole different governor there from memory, a whole different admiral there. You could have done very different in July. Probably, actually, if you turned up with a couple of brigades of Royal Marines in July, the British could have taken the port without the Free French. Michael Anderson, bearing in mind Roosevelt supported us, did we get any naval intelligence off the Americans this time, or was Roosevelt's support limited? It was limited and circumspect, and that's probably another reason why the British didn't do a straight landing in Dakar after Merzal Kabir, because they didn't want to try. They wanted to try and prevent Vichy France going full. They needed to get rid of the navy, but they didn't want to drive Vichy France into the arms of the Germans too much. Bishon, the bigger the British Free French force, the easier it is for the Vichy forces to save face when they surrender. The odds were so long, we did the honourable thing and saved lives. Pretty much. It's not a nice scenario, Darren. It is really not a nice scenario. But the reason I separated off the Free French from the British and Allied forces is because this is originally what de Gaulle was planning to go with. I think he was hoping for some British support. You know. Carmen, then if I'd have grabbed some troops, steamed straight for the and so went, hello, surrender, or well, you know the rest. Tempting. But again, America and Vichy France are the equations. What will America do if you do it, and what will Vichy France do if you do it? Rowan Cash, it always looks with Nelson and Rodney and the French all forward main batteries designs that the secondaries have some large blind spots, being so near the far rear. Is this the case or just my imagination? They occasionally have issues. Go on, Ego. Rank them in order. Ego. MacArthur, Keyes, Charles de Gaulle. Well, let's put it this way. The only one who really deserved his ego was Keyes out of those three. And And I think if there had to been a fight between the three, Keyes would probably have won. But Keyes' ego was more sensible than the others in that he did actually listen to other people. So I will actually. I think I'll. Stephanie Wilson, you've gone De Gaulle, MacArthur, Keyes. I would go MacArthur, De Gaulle, Keyes. But yeah, seem right. The envelopment, but problem is high ground to the east. Large artillery could dominate port, but desert and not direct supply route to such batteries possible. So shallow envelopment, incredible. It's an issue, but if you'd done it fast, you could have done it. Probably at night. Right, so the Vichy force involved. Now, the most important Vichy force involved are not actually active Vichy forces. They are active Vichy forces, but they are the semi-dreadnought, the pre-dreadnought, Vernald, which is, well, how do I put this politely? She's been turned into a fort. Now, here is where one of the interesting things comes up, because I have read multiple accounts which say a 9.4-inch gun was used. 9.4-inch guns. But I know the guns all come from her at Dakar. So, it makes sense. It would be a 9.4-inch shell, but sorry. No. Some say it's a 9.2-inch, sorry, and it's actually a 9.4-inch because that's what our guns are. Sorry. And the reason for that is because they presumed they'd have to be 9.4-inch because that's the standard which the British were building up to at the point. And looking for cruiser designs, but actually these came from a pre-dreadnought, semi-dreadnought, and therefore were 9.4s. And yes, it can get annoying sometimes, the sheer amount of 9-point this, 9-point that, because the actual 10-inch gun is actually a very bad design. So they tend to try and build as close to it as they possibly can without getting to it, because usually by the point you get to 10-inch, it causes problems and causes itself problems. So, prepare your eyes. All right, then. They took this design, this vessel, and turned it into a fort on Guaré Island, which is rather cool and rather sensible. As you can see, 12 9.4-inch guns positioned along there, and four 12-inch guns in two double centerline turrets. Jeff Beeler, how does Dakar compare with Torch in terms of political preparation? There is nowhere near the same level. Honestly, Dakar is terrible from preparation terms. Dakar is terrible. Comment. Not like for the Brits, things could get much worse. Victory already down quite a sizable amount. Not sure if US would react entirely bad, but there we go. That's the trouble. That's the equation. They're not sure, and if you're not sure, you sometimes hedge. Jeff Miller, Menace seems to have been mostly political rather than military nature. Definitely from de Gaulle's planning nature. I don't think a Navy's ever named a submarine after Leander Dirt Squad. I'll be back in a second. Now, also, please do note that I have decided that sloopy-like is now a technical phrase I am prepared to use when discussing ships. It works. Sloopy-like. It looks like a sloop. It talks like a sloop. It's not officially called a sloop, but it definitely could be a sloop. Right. Abelzaski, these sloopy-like colonial gunboats, referred to one as French call them, they were cruiser substitutes for colonial service, built mainly for President's interesting ships. Yeah, but as I said, I'm calling them sloopy-like because that's right. Dunkirk Einhammer. Wait, there's a Danish freighter? Yeah, there was a Danish freighter. Hold up in the port. Oh. Right, that's good. I get the feeling that de Gaulle felt that the force in Dakar would change sides if he turned up, like the army did for Napoleon when he returned from Elba. Why wouldn't they? He's de Gaulle. That's actually, honestly, what I think he was thinking as well. Garhamon, had Hood not been sunk, it probably would take Hood as an additional ship. Would also allow cruisers and faster transports to go ahead. Not sure of speeds though. Sorry. The Battle of Denmark Strait doesn't happen till 1941. Hood's still around at this point in 1940. Remember, this is September 1940 we're talking about. This is 80 years ago today this is happening. Literally, we're talking about events taking place 80 years ago on this day. When I start talking about events taking place at 7:30, 80 years ago today, it's 7:30 or around 7 sort of this evening. These events were actually happening live almost as we're talking because adjusting for time variations roughly. Jeff Hill, are you going to discuss the Renown affair that immediately preceded Dakar? Probably not, because honestly, I'm trying to focus on Dakar, and I'm allowing sort of wandering off topics on occasion when they feed into Dakar, but I'm trying. Renown doesn't feed in as much to Dakar as possible. Although, as I said, I would have actually used her if she'd been available. Scene any French aircraft and fields, Block and Dewitt's available. They were actually to take part in the later part of it. They do actually. The French Air Force only takes part in the second day. They don't take part in the first day. Carmen, I do like the idea of a ship becoming a fort, though. Who fancies grabbing the Type 23s and beaching them around Eastern Europe and then... could be interesting. Carmen. Oops, my dates be gone. Ah, wrong, I'm presuming. Don't worry. The Hood was also busy at this point. That's the trouble. Right, so let me go to my notes. The British arrived off Dakar on the 23rd of September. They found the French colony completely fogged in. That basically, as I said earlier in the introduction, your entire idea is you turn up and you look amazing. Well, if you turn up and there's going to be fog, it's the best thing is to slink away and wait till a light day and then turn up again. If you're going to rely on the impression of overwhelming might suddenly appearing on the horizon, if you're going to actually rely on that as your absolute strategy, then don't do it when there's fog in the air. And this is one I actually blame Cunningham for. Because Cunningham surely could have gone, right then, we're going to, currently a meteorologist, we reckon it's going to be fog. We have weathermen aboard as part of the staffs on the flagships. We know what the weather's going to be like. We're going to slow down. We have meteorologists aboard the aircraft carriers, all these things. We are able to fly ahead with aircraft and scout. We can see what the weather is like. We can wait till a sunny day. There'll be one not that far from equatorial, from the equator. It's not going to be, the fog isn't going to last forever. If your entire reliance on the mission is turning up and overawing your opponent, then, wait till it's daylight. Thomas Fortnite. Guri Island was occupied British several times during the 18th century. Yes, we didn't keep it. That's just the cruel thing. We should have done. It would have been really helpful now. Max Hammond. Did we know this was bound to fail, but we just setting up the goal up for a fail to bring him down a peg or two? After all, we didn't like him and he didn't like us. Not really. Honestly, it was de Gaulle's plan. De Gaulle was pushing for it, and the British went along with it because it would have been freaking useful. We actually wanted it. We put some very decent officers, there's a whole lot of commitments we put as part of this. Unfortunately, the planning consideration is nil. Keyes hasn't been in post long enough to really insist on proper joint operations planning. And it's theoretically, as I said, a French-led operation. So the French get the blame for it, but the British are the ones who provide the bulk of the forces. And the Polish are there to get their money back. That's literally why the Polish turn up. We want our money back. We want our gold. There's our gold. In fact, that would probably be sensible. Send a free Polish brigade. Free Polish brigade could have been quite a useful addition down there. Anyway. Gal Harmon, I kind of want to do a dramatic approach. So say just over the horizon until sunrise, then dramatic approach, steaming close, and giving the ultimatum while troops get ready to go ashore. My policy would be the ships are suddenly there in daylight and there's a whole load of Marines on. As I said, my policy would be there'd be a whole load of Marines pretty much locking off Dakar from the rest of the country. But what can I say? I'm slightly cruel. Right, let's look at the actual battle, what happens. So, they turn up. Now, where does this start to go wrong? I was asked earlier, where does it go wrong really badly? Well, let's start off with 2 Leclerc aircraft take off the flight deck of HMS Ark Royal with 4 free French airmen aboard to make a surprise landing at the airfield at Quacum, 3 miles from the town. And a free French motor launch with Lieutenant Commander Danglou, Major Gauchin, Captains Becorfoc and Perrin, and Sub-Lieutenant Porges starts heading in. to Dakar to deliver a personal message from de Gaulle to Bosson. Bosson. And whilst this was all happening, British airplanes were dropping leaflets on a town, and de Gaulle was broadcasting on the radio. Okay. This is an attempt at a pure information operations campaign. It's beautiful. It's also a failure because no one has bothered to look at the people while they were dealing with. These were not people who were going to surrender. And you're now wasting your surprise. You're giving them time to prepare everything, to dial in your positions, to work out the ranges, everything. They have plenty of time because of what you're doing. Harmon, but then if they refuse to surrender, then the landing forces would probably be in trouble. That's why if you have the troops ashore first, you put the troops ashore at night. And this is the thing, they have 2 light brigades of colonial troops as the bulk of their land forces. They have some sailor units as well, but they're not that many as well. That many because they need them to man the ships and the guns. So they're mostly relying on colonial troops. And they are good troops. We know this because they fight off the French Marines. But that's a difference between fighting off a couple of companies of troops and fighting off 2 brigades ashore. Take care, old Richard. Dirt Squad, I think the Free French forces were in the UK at the time, learning how to say understand. Understand. Say again. Possibly. Gaharman, oh god, you can't do that to the Vichy. The Polish would rip them to pieces. The Polish want their money back. Jack, well, in late 1940, Polish One Corps was still in organization on full of cadre skeleton officer units. But I think they could have probably got a brigade ready for that amount of gold. Gaharman, that's good. They were learning how to say, we are Poles with lines. Probably. I wonder how Polish troops would have felt fighting against French troops when the Polish army in the West had been fighting alongside the French in France. These were the French who'd surrendered to the Germans in their minds. So, what happens now? Well, if you want to know what a absolute bust-up looks like, the airmen land at Oakham and find the commanding officer waiting to greet them. The airmen promptly take him prisoner, laid out success signal for the Ark-Rawls planes on the ground, and then probably get taken themselves because the airfield guard find it rather insulting to take their commander prisoner at gunpoint when he was greeting you with an offer of a cup of coffee and, hello, where have you come from, what's the problem? The thing was, this might be in a scenario where actually if they tried words rather than guns, they might have succeeded, because if they got the Air Force on the side, and judging by the fact the commander comes out and meets them and is so unencumbered with troops initially that he is taken prisoner by 4 men who then manage to lay out a success signal, it suggests that he's fairly keen on your side, or at least he's giving you the benefit of the fricking doubt. Unfortunately, it turns out that Angelo is just as bad at diplomacy. So, he's going into a port and he's sailing with a document. And this is the thing which surprises me, because I'd have thought if I'd been de Gaulle, I would have sent a signal asking to meet with the leaders of French West Africa. I'd have probably invited them to a meal aboard the British warship as neutral territory, or I don't know, the Polish troop transport. I'd invited them to send their representatives to come meet with me and talk to me. I wouldn't have been shouting from a radio, and I wouldn't have been sending really insult. Look, he insults Landrau by sending the letter to Bosson. Yes, Bosson is the governor and the senior person there, but Landrau is the senior military officer. Honestly, if Bosson what Bosson wants isn't what Bosson wants and doesn't want doesn't really matter as much as the guy in charge of the defences, and that's Landrau, who's wandering around, who meets with Downblue first and manages to basically order their arrestment, and they run away under a fusillade of machine gun fire. So far, it's really not gone well. Schumack, these are the French that actively assisting the Germans by standing by and not actively opposing Germans. The Poles would be pissed. Yeah, as I said. Abzaski, units organized in France were either broken undergoing reorganization or interned in Switzerland, Spain. Even Polanski brigade was only partially retreated from Bretagne. Descott. Also, some Poles felt that they had essentially been betrayed in the phony war. I doubt that they would have many qualms about fighting the French or essentially collaborating with the Germans. Yeah. Concentrations. My grandfather was on Sabansky. Cool. Then I can't out. You probably have to restrain them in one way or another. Sure, Mike. I'd go with the Polish troops shipped to try to emphasize the coalition nature of the operation and thus the war as a whole. That's pretty much what I would be getting for. The Vichy aren't exactly playing. Now, here's the first technique that this might not be going to be a walk in the park and they might be preparing to fight. Because what do? They send some submarines to sea. Percy and Ajax. They were spotted by Forsyth and Inglefield. They were pursued by both. The destroyers came under fire from a shore battery, took hits. The Percy tried to attack on the Barham from on the surface. Which led to her being sunk by the British. I can't think why. A single submarine in daylight on the surface trying to get to a battleship. No, that has success written all over it. So at this point, please don't take it the wrong way, but neither side are actually acquitting themselves of any form of military glory. And the shore batteries start firing on the British. Cunningham signals, "Why are you firing on me? I'm not firing on you." They signal to retire to 20 miles. You see, the thing is, you can win this easily if you turn up and don't fight. If you manage to overrule. The moment you start fighting, it doesn't become about any higher ideals or anything like that. It becomes you're fighting for your mate next to you. You don't give a flying hoot about De Gaulle and that stuff if you're an average trooper or sailor. What you care about is if you don't fire, they're going to fire at you and you'll get killed. So you're going to fire fast and hard. So pretty much by 12 o'clock, they've decided that it's now no chance for a peaceful resolution, and the only option is to go for an all-out assault, which is going to be bloody. It's going to be really bloody. They all know this. No one expects it to be easy, no one expects it to be quick, and no one expects it to be painless. And they honestly haven't really brought enough troops for this kind of operation. Which sounds terrible, because earlier I was going, well, 2 brigades, they've got enough there. They've got enough there if they've already got them ashore. If those 2 brigades can maneuver and they're getting fire support from the warships, there's nothing in Dakar which can stop them. If, however, they have to offload under fire and then advance to contact under fire, with limited support from the warships, as those warships have had to cover the landings while getting shot at, and are now covering the movements while still getting shot at, so probably are losing numbers. That's a different matter. That's good. Had Berserker entered? No. Blizzquakia entered service alongside the Ariete? If so, I would have made her sure to send her along with her fleet, just as you say, to make sure the French see that it's a coalition force. Yes, she has, but she's currently off with some Trouble-class destroyers doing something naughty. Sure, Max. Seems like the wrong people were in charge at local level. They were, yeah. It really wasn't a good command structure. That was good. It becomes a situation of if you didn't resort to violence first, you didn't resort to violence quickly enough. Pretty much. That's good. It's an operation where the one person you definitely don't need is the Ghoul. Possibly. Rowan Cash, what were the car's coastal batteries like? 4 12-inch guns and several 9.4-inch guns, all from that pre-dreadnought I pictured earlier. We go back. All taken from the ship on the... No. You don't like to move, do you? All from the pre-dreadnought above, but given some modern sights and finders, so they were still fairly accurate. And given a whole load of French Navy crews, so they could really fire. Bishop, they should have studied Commodore Matthew Perry when it comes to overawing your diplomatic opponent peacefully with military might, ceremony, and resolve. Probably. Fairly good one to look at. That's good. That's Clark. Cash, I think the Clark said that they had taken the guns from a French pre-dreadnought. Yep. Michael Sanderson. Speaking as a former infantry soldier, they should have landed troops and carried out a pincer movement to isolate the isthmus. Then the RN could have dominated the situation. Yep. Which is what I've basically been saying. It works. I was asking, Carmen, Grom was sunk in Norway campaign, but we also had Brewers. She was French built. Could be used to sneak into harbor on Dakar. Tempting. Shamak, you should have landed at night with the brigades. Try the diplomatic approach, and if that fails, you say we have 2 brigades ashore. We will blow everything up and seize it anyway. There were also some 4-inch guns as well. If we go to here, the 4-inch guns are the only things which don't come from this vessel. There are 4 12-inch, 12 9.4-inch, 16 12-pounders, which are all roughly 3 inches. So it's it's got some 4-inch guns around, and the 4-inch guns are used. Now, as goes on, there's a fight with some destroyers. There's a fight with cruisers. There are various messages going back and forward. But at 5:30 p.m., this is on the 20. It's on the 23rd. 2 Free French sloops sail into Rafik harbour and put some men ashore. And the actual phrase is "put a few men ashore" is used in the fair numbers. I've seen numbers which look around 60 to 50, and they then get attacked back with 4-inch gunfire and Senegalese troops armed with machine guns. Sorry. It's how do I put this politely? It's pathetic. It's mealy-mouthed minimalism, and it's not going to work. If you're going to go for storming the castle, you have to storm the castle. You don't throw a skirmish line at it. The next day, on 24th, this is 80 years ago today, the British fire 400 rounds of 15-inch ammunition and fail to silence the batteries. They get attacked by Glen Martin bombers coming from the French Air Force, which also go up and attack Gibraltar as well in retaliation. HMS Australia loses her spotter aircraft, a Walrus seaplane, and those were Australia's only casualties of the operation. But pretty much by 9:30, the British are withdrawing with air cover provided by Ark-Royals fighters, but Resolution doing 10 knots with a 12-degree list. Barham was towing Resolution, but was damaged. And yeah, they were taking their forces back to Freetown in Sierra Leone, because that was the only option for they can get to safely. John, look, hello, John. As soon as the situation goes left, why not just mercilessly blast the Anchorage from distance and have Ark Royal dominate the skies? It would have been tempting, but there was still fog and issues with doing that, and they didn't want to. They were trying to avoid civilian casualties, but even as it is, their firing in the first day did actually end up with some civilian casualties, and I think also it ended up some on the second day as well. Max Anton, Dirt Squad. They had the RM and the Foreign Legion. Those are fighting troops. The Army Catering Corps could occupy something and feed them badly, so they want to surrender. That'd be quite cool. Night Heron Production. Hello, Night Heron Production. Hello. Going back to a previous point of yours, why can you only build up to a 10-inch gun and not a 10-inch gun altogether? I don't understand the reason why when we've built up to a 16-inch gun. Basically, don't ask, won't know. Also, when it comes to guns, I'm an utter noob. Right, so, let me put it this way. 10-inch is at the point at which it's getting really difficult and really heavy to maneuver, so you get a very slow rate of fire. I.e., you get the same rate of fire as you get for probably a 15-inch. So you might as well build a 15-inch because you're not getting that much more firepower from it. And the rate of fire of a 10-inch is roughly the same as a 15-inch, but its firepower it gives you, the explosive it gives you, is not much, and not so much more than a 9.2, 9.4 inch, or even really an 8-inch that it justifies it. It's at that point at which it's basically, it has all the negatives of being below 10 inches and none of the benefits of being above 10 inches. No, has all the negatives of being of 10 inches and above, and all the negatives of being 10 inches and below take place at 10. That makes more sense. So it is the worst of both worlds. You neither want it for your fast firing guns, you don't want it for your big guns, because if you're going to go for big guns, again, weight-wise, a difference between a 10-inch mount and a 12-inch or a 14-inch mount is not so much that it's worthwhile worrying about. And then you have also the treaty system, so, they have fun. Kaham, no productions. The rate of fire and weight of shell goes up dramatically. Well, no, the rate of fire goes up. The weight of shell goes up dramatically. The rate of fire goes down dramatically. A difference in rate of fire between a 10-inch gun as a faster 12-inch and a lot slower than an 8-inch. Yeah. It's not as powerful enough either. Yeah. Silly Manicos, hello. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy would Churchill have been if de Gaulle had been lost overboard on the return trip? I'm not going to incriminate a dead person by saying how much he might have danced. And as long as questions are within the scope roughly of what we're talking about in lives, there is no such thing as a silly question. And even when they're not within that scope, if I think I can answer them, I will try and answer them, or point you where you can find the answer, because that's how we learn. I only know the stuff I know because I ask a lot of questions. And sometimes I've had wrong answers, and sometimes I repeat those answers, and then I get corrected by people. And that teaches me a doubly lesson. Steam White, 1940 landing procedures, equipment and support craft not in existence. Be tough in a non-resistant landing, much less. Okay, A, the beaches weren't heavily fortified. B, they did actually have 13 landing craft with them, and these were top-of-the-range landing craft for the time in 1940. They're quite capable of doing this. They're not massive landing craft, but they are there. And they could have also used ships, boats, and would have quite normally. This is part of the procedures at the time. And the Royal Marines are practiced with night operations. In fact, it was one of the key things they were formed up into Brigade for, because the idea was the Marines would go in at night, secure the area, and then the rest of the forces would come in and set up the MONAB the next day. So basically, the British have been training the Marines in night operations for a long time, along with the rest of the force. So the Marines are very capable at doing the night stuff. It won't be as good as it would be in 1944, 1945, because there's a huge acceleration in terms of technology and understanding and learning which goes on in those years. But it would have still been very effective for 1940. And I've done some videos about that in the landing craft videos and all those things, and the origins of landing craft and where they came from, and the fact that they were there. There is there again. There are. I have debates with people who sit there and go, all this stuff suddenly appears in World War II for D-Day and all these things, and you go, no, it's been being developed during the 1930s, and quite a lot of it started out earlier than 1936, if not 1930 itself. Right. Michael Sanderson. So below 10-inch, you can have a quick firing gun, but above that, you need mechanical ramming. Yep. Or rather, 10-inch and above, you need mechanical ramming. Below 10-inch, it's just, yeah. Carl McGasman. Besides, 9x4 is 24 centimeter in metric. So France and Germany are mostly metric. Yeah. Shumack. I'll interpret the answer as 7. Sounds good. Vision. Night Productions. Think Admiral Grouse Bay with her 11-inch guns. German would have been better off with the faster fire of the 8-inch guns of other heavy cruisers. Yeah. You could also have more turrets. But, and I do point out this, of course, I have been having interesting quite a cross-examination on the subject on the Deutschland class, and while it's being quickly brought up before we get to the summary, and with the idea that I might well end at 8:30 this evening to go get some tea, because I haven't had any yet. The Deutschland class, one of the interesting things is when I've been chatting with people and working through, they do have certain scenarios and actually where they make sense and they're quite good, well designed. They're quite a good design. The trouble is what they're used for is not what they're well designed for. In many ways, they are a pre-dreadnought replacement heavy cruiser. Hence, they have the 11-inch guns, and it's for status and these things. But the whole point is, once you have those, it doesn't really help their status when they're going around the world, and doesn't help their status as a surface raider in offsetting the UK. They're not enough to take on a battleship. There's all sorts of problems. They might look cool on paper, but they don't, in reality, match up to it. But I do understand the logic behind the Germans' construction of them. I just don't think the logic actually makes sense when you look at the scenario they're actually going to be used in. And doesn't make sense with the scenario they're actually supposedly preparing them for either. But there is a logic behind it. Kahaman, could we conveniently have put the Gaul on a landing ship and conveniently lost him in attack? Stephen Wilson, I cannot possibly suggest that France would probably been rather better off post-war if de Gaulle had fallen overboard. Stephanie, you're usually one of the nicest and most politest people in my chat, I have to admit. They're all very polite as a rule, but usually you are really, really nice and polite. So I'm not sure what de Gaulle's done to personally upset you, but would be very worried if I'd ever been de Gaulle in your presence. That's gone. They thought they were, which is why they went for 8-inch guns on the Prinz Eugen class after the Deutschland class. Yeah. Derp Squad. One of my feline research assistants is snoring away happily behind me. I'm glad I am helping the feline research assistants. Derp Squad. Dr. Clark. Wait, I have to know. Was a Blackburn Blackburn? No. There was no Blackburn involved in this operation. Vision. Deutschland class cruiser worked best facing off against other Baltic powers. Against coastal defense troops. Yeah, That was a thing they were good for. That's good. Ironically, the Deutschen class would have been a very good anti-surface radar combat squad. Yes, that is actually Daniel Freeman and I, when we were talking for Tsingtao, that was actually one of the options we came up with. They were very good for that role. Ironically, they'd have been far better on replacing the Town class, and the Town class would be far better replacing the Deutschland class for that mission. Those missions. Stephanie wasn't. Yeah, I'm old enough to remember the goal. Yeah. Roland Cash. I'd never known. Anyway, Roland Cash. Even the Dalai Lama frowns when he sees the goal. Come, sadly, I'm so young I don't remember these leaders or people. Eric Akan, hello. Right, so let's consider the consequences, right? Overall consequences for the Allies, it was annoying on a strategic level. The most annoying thing for them was the damage to the battleships, the cruisers, the armed trawlers, and the 6 swordfish lost. Yes, we're building a whole lot more, but we lost 6 of them. It was annoying. More importantly, though, out of this, the Ghoul is a very big personal blow. And frankly, you can place all the problems of the factionalism within the Free French at the floor of this. You can place all the problems that come up with it at this one's floor, because this scenario causes such damage to his reputation, to his whole selling point, that he's forever worried about his back. He's forever looking over his shoulder. The British might have been tempted to make use of Dalland. The Americans certainly were, to try and replace de Gaulle and lead in the Free French. Having him killed was sensible. De Gaulle, from this point on, but prior to this, he's been looking for allies because he's been secure, and if he wins, it burnishes his position. At this point, he's looking at people as threats. The Battle of Gabon doesn't do much to secure his relationship with his allies afterwards, even though 2 months later that does happen, and that strengthens up France, or the Free French. Mainly because the Allies are looking at Gabon and going, so you're Gaulle's okay as long as the politics and infrastructure are being run by Adolphe Sylvestre Felix Eboué, and the soldiers are being run by Philippe Leclerc de Huchenloc, who was going by the nom de clé of Leclerc to try and protect his fat wife and children back home. Yeah. Michael Sanderson, I agree with that statement, but I don't think we should probably repeat it too loud. Jeff Beeler. De Gaulle takes the French forces, French forces, and takes Central Africa and Chad for the French all zone. So overall, a win for him. The forces are from the bases of Leclerc'sburg. No, he takes the credit for it. He doesn't do it. It's all the gentleman on this side of the photograph, rather than the gentleman on this side of the photograph. This side takes the credit for it, especially in the American press and in the press which is put around the world. But in the British press and in a lot of sections, it goes into Leclerc, who actually does lead the troops, and a lot of the emphasis is on Eboué. And if without him, yeah. Basically, by the time de Gaulle turns up, everything's already been arranged. Leclerc's arrives weeks before him, I think. Count Gansford. No, there was none of them. See what? De Gaulle was the only alternative to the future of full Marxists in France. A Stalinist nation next to the UK was just as terrible as Hitler Allied nation. Yep. Philip Smith. Blucher ex Deutschland hunted T-34 at the Baltic coast, even half sunken. Yes. Well, you know, if you have the guns, you can do it. Carl Hammond, consequences which would likely be lost when we hit a storm, we lose De Gaulle. Even no. Jeff Miller, in the end, Dakar is replaced by Freetown and not missed. Freetown's been there before Dakar. It has to be built up, and it is still missed. Dakar is still missed because it's not in the same position as Freetown and Dakar are not in the same position. Freetown is much further around, and there's always the threat of Dakar. There's always the worry that Dakar might actually turn out to be a thorn in the side. Because of its positioning, it was a very major threat. And this has an effect on British deployments. It means when you have a convoy going past, you have to have your heavy forces out just in case they get Rickaloo working somehow and it does go out and threaten a convoy. It's a constant drain of resources, so frankly, it would have been better than being dealt with. The defense of Dakar must have been well designed to inflict that amount of damage on modern warships. Did the Allied ships do any damage to the forts? A bit, but not that much. Honestly, the big problem was they kept getting the range wrong on the forts, and they were using armor piercing, and they needed to use high explosive on them. Basically, it was Gallipoli all over again. Vision, de Gaulle is the Frenchman who does not give up in May 1914 and dares something about it. That is to his credit. I have to concede that one. Garhan, popular vote time, guys. When do you consider there to be a turning point in the war for the UK? I mean, it seems that things did not go over all that well for some time. The thing is, the Brits are in trouble, but I don't consider the Brits out the fight at any point. This is the thing. It's going to sound strange, but 1939 is a draw. 1940 is a loss in terms of allies, but Britain's still holding in quite firmly. And 1941, it starts to build back up. 1942, it loses because of Japan, so they end the war, but then America does. So 1943, we're back, sort of broadly speaking, winning. And 1944, 45 happen. So, you know, the war is not a straightforward thing. It goes backwards and forwards, it ebbs and flows. Oh. Stephanie Wilson, de Gaulle took the credit for a lot of things he did not do. Yep. Vision, turning point of war for the UK was December 7th, 1941. I think Churchill said so. Churchill said a lot of things. It was definitely very helpful, December 7th, 1941. It hastened something, but honestly, the British but honestly, it would have been far better for the British, and they'd been a far better more stronger if it hadn't taken place till, I don't know, April 1942. And Jeff Beeler, in the American press, no one wants to hear about the black guy, though. It has to be de Gaulle. I think, sadly, that is probably the case. So that's why de Gaulle gets it all. That's got de Gaulle. I won World War II single-handed against the entire Axis, even in the Pacific, and the same time as I won in the war in Europe. I'm not surprised. Jeff Miller, Dakar supplies have to pass Gibraltar. No, they don't. They tried bringing them over land and flying them and all sorts of things. And yes, they had. But also, the other option is that the British were letting the Free French, the Vichy French, from France to France, merchant transport was allowed. They were trying not to interfere with it, so that would keep going and allow them to build up in a bit, Dakar, and repair things post this attack. Aviator 1701E. Looking with hindsight today, things were already turning around for UK at this point. The Battle of Britain was shifting into the Blitz at this time. Yeah. JBL. In the end, Dakar was an attempt to get something for nothing. That did have a price that the Allies could not pay at the time. It's rather that it had a price the Allies weren't prepared to pay at the time. But the British, it's going to sound strange. You have troops going all around the world. If you had turned up... Okay, for this point, I turn to Roger Keyes and I turn to some of the summaries, which bits about the car I have read in other operational assessments. And basically, the thinking that comes through in Combined Operations Command in Britain at this time is that the car would have worked with the forces they sent if they'd sent them 4 or 5 weeks earlier, or even 2 weeks earlier, before the cruisers arrived, basically. Or it works if you send another brigade, or at least light brigade size formation along, and so you have more troops and you can land them and do the job. Because that's the problem. You need to have enough force you can overawe. And they don't. They have enough force. They could have overawed the force that was in the car 5 weeks prior to this. So in August 1940, but not in September 1940. Grace sure, Mac. There's the hilarious bit towards the end of Kelly's Heroes, where to get the French out of their hair and slow down the main army, American force, they tell them the American jewel is de Gaulle. I think I remember that one. Sure, Mac. See what? There is some merit to that, but I think Ike wanted to keep the French officials divided. Carmen. It's off topic, but wondering why there's no naval museums in Wales or Scotland and most are in England. Honestly, like all the things in Britain, it's been where is the money to build them, and who is prepared to put up the money to build them. And there should be them in Scotland. There should be them in Wales. There should be them in Liverpool. In Liverpool, they have a submarine sitting on the Wirral side of the Mersey ferry, which is really quite cool. A German submarine, which is I'm not that keen because it's been cut in half to make it easier for people to access, and I don't like it having been cut in half. But it's rather nice to wander around. There are a few museums around the UK, but one of the nicest ones is down in Falmouth. If you're ever in Cornwall, there is it's not a massive museum, but there's a little museum in Falmouth. It's not far from Pendennis Castle and St Mawes, and those are always worth wandering around. But there's an actual little museum on the dockyard, which has all sorts of interesting things in it, and all sorts of stuff there which you would never believe is there, from thanks to the Cornish Maritime Heritage and their efforts they've done. So it's really worthwhile going down there if you can. Hi, Calgunnan. So, Dakar. Why didn't it work? Well, I would say because primarily de Gaulle underestimated Bosson. Yes, Larder and all these things, they're important. But they can only implement what's already there. And one of the things Bosson does, which no one else has really done, is raises far more, increases the number of Senegalese troops under his command far more than he's supposed to. He actually raises them far more than the French government back home realize he's doing. And again, he has fun with the French government. When the Vichy government tried to order him to do things, he doesn't want to do them. He goes, make me. So I would say to make Dakar successful, you need to get Bosson on side. And you needed to approach him properly. So you either needed to intimidate him by showing up almighty and actually looking almighty. I mean, turning up everything, ensigns, everything gaily, and invite him to your ship for a meeting and go, look at how much force we've got. That's the problem. The whole thing is done back to front. You have the pilots flying into the Akam airfield, which goes, oh, God, wrong. You don't do that. You have the little boat, which again has they're going to the wrong people. They're naval officers coming into a port, and they want to go talk to the colonial official. They don't ask to speak to the admiral. No, it just and you have radio transmissions going off. It's just no. Random. JP, could Somerville and Renown have beaten the three French light cruisers? No, but possibly he could have. But more importantly, Somerville, if he'd chosen to abandon Gibraltar at that point to an extent and brought Force H south to assist Cunningham, then he might have provided enough firepower to do this. But honestly, Gibraltar was the priority. So he couldn't. Because no one told him or the admiral in charge of Gibraltar what was going on. So they couldn't do anything. Again, this is part of the problem with de Gaulle going off and acting almost half-cocked, is that no one can coordinate things properly. If you'd been able to coordinate properly, the British could have blocked... they could have found a way to block the cruisers from getting through the Gibraltar. They'd have had a live fire exercise or something going on that day. Stay out of the way. We are engaging submarines. Boom, boom, boom. Keep dropping depth charges. That would soon slow them down. They're not going to run through them. Or we're laying mines. Keep clear. Carmen, Dr. Clark, where's Falmouth? Not sure I'll be headed to Camborne and Paynton. Is it near them? Yeah, it's not far, actually. It's Camborne, Paynton is north Cornwall. Falmouth is down near the Lizard. It's not that far. It's a bit drive, but it's about 30, 40 minutes. It's nice. Michael Sandon, Turbine is in Newcastle. The absolute game-changing ship in propulsion. Thank you, Charles Parson. Yeah, actually rather cool to look around. And that's where also the same place where there's the excellent home of the Tyne and Weir archives, where you can find all sorts of stuff from Vickers. It's cool. So, Mac, overconfidence and a lack of contingencies. Pretty much. Carmen, basically it's going to be a purpose trip, not even near either of my destinations. To an extent. Jamie Clark. Liverpool does have the Western Approaches Command Museum. Drac did a pair of interesting videos on it recently, and that is a lovely place to go around. It is really quite cool. And then they have the submarine on the other side. So I think the submarine's on the other side of the Mersey because they want to save it from the Western Approaches Command ghosts. Carl I'm trying to think what's in Wales, and I'm like, Pigeon, off topic. You said the Leander class frigates were inflexible because they focus on, well, AAS. I don't think I said they are inflexible. I mean that post refitting, basically. When they're refitted, they're a balanced design for the 1960s, but in the 1970s, when they start losing guns and things, because they aren't large enough to really be upgraded that much. So they have to be specialized to be upgraded. God's drowsiness. Did the US and UK support dissidents in French Africa like the way they supported communist dissidents in Southeast Asia? Not really. Again, Vichy French territories were a bit of a minefield in terms of what are you going to do. They're more likely to try and support free French groups in those areas. Shamak, Basson seems like the kind of man that de Gaulle could sit down with and that de Gaulle could convince. I'm not sure if de Gaulle could have convinced him, but I think if Cunningham and Irwin had had a chance to chat with Bossan, they could have probably convinced him, especially if they had another. Let's put it this way. In the contingency, let's say that another battleship is available, another capital unit. Let's say Somerville comes down with Renown and a cruiser and another couple of destroyers. You then have a significant force there. You invite them to you show up. You invite them to lunch. And while you're inviting the commanders to lunch, you have some people quietly checking out various points of the coast. About a night's march away from a night's march or away from here. And then you start landing your troops in the afternoon. And next day you go, you've seen how much force we've got? We took you out to dinner. You've now got brigades behind you. Those brigades can fuck around, wander around and make a lot of noise, look massive and intimidating. And yeah, that's your basic plan. That works. Carmen. Okay, that's my friend in Camborne going to a ship. She owes me anyway. Glad to hear it. Oh, Jerison. We're near HMS Tupperware, near Leon Sea, Dinghy Club. Cool. That's good. To stop the French ships going through the Straits of Gibraltar, tell the captains that you have wine and a secret store of cheese. All right, and that's 8:30. Dr. Clark, take us to see what you make. Let's make it Cooking and Naval History Live. I'm not doing that, and tonight it might be. I'm not sure what I'll be getting for tea. I'm hungry. I'll find. Let's see what's cooking. There are some smells coming up from downstairs, so there's always the odds that someone's cooking something nice for me as well. I'm not sure. It could also be my sister's doing a gluten-free concoction for herself, in which case, no, because she's gluten and dairy-free because of allergies, and that just tastes. I love my sister dearly, but her food tastes wrong. It tastes wrong. Right, Vision. Be nice if Liverpool could get that last black swan suit from Egypt. Go nice with you, but West Approach Command. It would be very nice. Like it would be very nice to track down a certain grey class gunboat, and see what she looks like now as a houseboat. Anyway, Seymour, Nelson or Rodney would be better for a lunch table at the base of those 16-inch guns. Yes, they would be, but they weren't available. Barham would have done perfectly fine. She would have done. There's also an interesting reason that both Cunningham and Irwin are aboard Barham. Although Irwin does find it annoying because it means sometimes he's sailing away from his troops because the battleship's doing what the battleship needs to do. Oh, so thank you, everyone. I'm going to say last questions, and then I'm going to finish for the evening and go. And as I said, there are strong smells of food coming. So I hope you're all that. I hope you've all enjoyed it. Thank you again for the super chats. Thank you again for everyone who likes, for everyone who's shared, for everyone who's subscribed, and for everyone who's pressed the little bell. It's very kind of you all. Ikas, I'm glad you managed to join us for it. Yeah, Felix B. Oh yeah, baby destroyer. Yeah, that's basically what the steam gunboats were. They were baby destroyers. Awzowski, thank you. Steam White. We are still eating outside that and takeout. I want a sit down restaurant. Not gonna happen for a while, I think, in the UK. Kaham. I've had gluten free food. Well, we do have sit down restaurants, but it's very very tame. Carl, I've had for gluten free food, also dairy free food. Nothing wrong with it to me. Gluten free fairy coconut milk, vegan food on the other hand, not good. Yeah. My sister's gluten and dairy free. Once it's gluten and dairy free, it loses quite a lot of its fun. Thank you, William Bolton. Thank you, Greg Salsky. Vision, thank you. Derek Hyanhammer, thank you very much. Enjoy your toast. Gahaman, I speak from experience on Scout Camp. We thought we were smart, we weren't. I hope that brings us. Yeah, I have hung around with Scouts on a few occasions. Take care, Seymour. Joy of having friends who are Scout leaders and being quite good at the outdoorsy stuff as well myself. I get dragged along sometimes when they're short leaders. Constantinus, Bonnie, thank you. Cinemaca, Muchon, thanks. Pleasure. James, thank you. And Alex, see you next time. Dev Squad, Death Squad. In episode on Black. I'd be interested on your take on Navy's aircraft. I might do that. I actually now, I've had a job cancelled. I was supposed to be going away for 4 days in October to teach at the end of the month. To be a course director for Justin Craig in London and run an A-level and GCSE revision centre. And they've now cancelled it. So I've got an extra day, which I hadn't been planning on. And I had been planning on doing a video for it, but I was thinking I might actually do a live now for it. And I'm still considering what topic that's going to be. So anyone has suggestions for what topic they would like for the extra suddenly appeared White Space in October, which is going to be on October the 29th. Please put it in the comments down below on not in the live chat, put it in the actual comments, and because that's easier for me to go back and check, and I will think about it and see what I can do and see what strikes my fancy. So it's 29th of October is now unexpectedly free. So yeah. Oh, and I hope you're all going to be watching World of Warships live tomorrow. It should be a very interesting one. It's on the Battle of Moon Sound, and I know Drac is definitely looking forward to it. And I've got to record Bilge Bumps as well tomorrow. Right. Jennifer, thank you. See you next time. Dirt Squad, episode Nighthand Production. Thank you for all the wonderful talk. Enjoy your tea. Thank you. Brock Payne, back and good night. Take care, Brock. Glad you survived. Eric Akan, enjoy your stream. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here. Jerison, bye and have a nice evening. Steve White, we had Forest. They'll burn up. Ooh. Mike Stone, this was fun and educational. Thanks a lot. That's my pleasure. That's what I aim it to be. Fun and educational. Carmen, experience that we tried being lazy and tried making free meals. Ooh, that's always bad in the outside. Vision, video on Felix Ibu. I'm not really the person to do that because it's not my specialism, but I hope someone will do a video and will do some stuff on Felix because he's really freaking cool. Carmen, that's Clark. A live tour of HMS Belfast? That would be fun, but I think Drac's going to do that first before me. Dirt Squad. If it had been October the 19th, it would have been my birthday, and I would have asked for the Black Moon present. No, it's 29th. Take care, and happy birthday for the 19th. Bye, Jerison. Bye, Atomic Babble. Hello, Atomic Babble. Haven't seen you in a while. Bye. And thank you for coming here. Night Production. Last question. When are you covering the Air Refuser class cruisers? Keen to hear why you put the Perth subclass of landers in that class. No, I put the Amphion class in their own class. So I'm going to do videos on the Amphion class, and then I'm going to do a video on the Air Refuser class, because I think they deserve their own things. Whilst the Amphion class are a subclass of the Leanders, they deserve their own. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Carl. Kyle. Right then. Thank you, everyone. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, Loki 1392. Thank you very much.